workshop of August 19th, 2024 to order. In the process of setting the agenda, I understand that we might have an amendment to the agenda.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment concerning the sign ordinance in the LEC, specifically having to do with LED signs. This was kind of precipitated by South Point High School, looking to replace sort of the inner workings there was a bit outdated. So we thought it might be a good opportunity to update some of that language. So I would move that we add that item to the agenda.
Okay, that would be added as item C5. Is there, I'll take that as a motion to approve the amended agenda. Is that sufficient?
Well, he's moving to add to
Okay,
it.
yes.
Let's add.
Yes, is there a second? Second. All those in favor of adding item C5? Aye.
Now approve.
Now, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Alex, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor of approving the amended agenda? Aye. The amended agenda is approved. That leads us to the consent agenda. We don't typically have one at workshops, but we do today. A lot of these items we're discussing today were moved from the August 5th regular meeting in light of the circumstances of that meeting. Miles, if you would lead us through the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. The first item, B1, is an approval of an ordinance to close Main Street for the annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and that is on December 2nd, 2024, between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. And it actually closes the street between Catawba Street and Glenway Street. So that's item B1. Item B2 is the consideration of a denial of a request for an ordinance to close portions of multiple streets on November 28, 2024 for the Turkey 5K. And you can see that there are staff recommendations, and it kind of outlines the reasons why staff is recommending denial of this application at this time. The amount is $225,000. It is within our budget for this fiscal year. It was actually budgeted at $250,000. And this is the sewer capacity study that takes into account the remaining portion of the city of Belmont outside the South Point Peninsula. That's already been studied last fiscal year. Inside, you can see that the contract kind of lays out their process and the timing to complete the entire scope of services would be 7 months. And that is the final consent item, so I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda?
I do.
Yes.
Just a couple. So just on number one, and this one should be really quickly. What did we do? What was the time when we started it last year? For the street closing?
For
The tree lighting.
For the tree
I think
lighting?
that was 6, wasn't it?
I can't recall. I will, however, point out that the tree lighting last year was in late November. The tree lighting this year, as if you recall that voluminous discussion,
Yes,
it's the first Monday in December. We have a council meeting the first Monday in December here in City Works, so maybe that is when we do with it. But are you in charge of that, Cassidy? Can you provide information in response to Alex's question?
The road closure time, we typically just add on additional to the front and end, so we can set the exact time later if it needs to be adjusted based on the meeting, but we provide, like I said, additional padding on the front and the back end just for setup and breakdown.
Okay. I mean, we had just kind of discussed that already. I just wanted to kind of call that out.
Unless it's been discussed at the events level, so it has not. Yeah.
And that setup is normally a lot shorter than most. They often use a lot of police vehicles instead of some of the concrete barricades. So we may not close it at 5.
Okay.
We typically try not to do so before we absolutely have to, but just for NCDOT approval purposes.
Okay.
Like a little extra.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I guess on that one then, should we, I guess this is more of an open question, Jim, should we adjust that or just kind of go as is?
I'm fine with it as is. I think we typically, if you look at Friday Night Live, et cetera, we sort of tack on just to be on the safe side. But, you know, I don't anticipate it would be that much different from years past, so I think it's fine.
Okay. Number 2 is going to be item B2. So, and again, I just want this kind of read into the record. You know, as it outlines, it says, consider denial of a request of an ordinance to close portions of multiple streets for the Turkey Day 5K. So I just want to be clear, this is not saying that we are denying that this event is going to happen.
That's
Correct.
correct. It could still happen, just with this particular applicant is the reason for the denial.
Okay, and we don't have to go further into that, but I just wanted to make that kind of clear that this will more than likely still happen, because I know there's a lot of participants in this. I know me and my wife also participate in it, so again, I don't want it to be perceived that we are canceling the Turkey Day 5K, so I think it's important that we call that out. And then that's all my questions, Jim.
Okay. Any other, yes, any questions or comments from anyone else? As to number 3, I have a few minor revisions to the proposal from Withers Ravenel, just grammar, spelling, incomplete sentences, that sort of thing. So I can provide that to the city attorney, but they're nothing substantive that would change the actual import of the language or anything. So, all right. Yes.
No.
Okay. If there's no further questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda with Jim's edits to consent agenda item B3.
All right. Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes. Consent agenda approved.
Yes, and Cassidy Lackey is going to make the presentation here.
So not much of an actual presentation here, just some background information for you guys. This request was made by Elevation Church some time ago, and the collective decision was that since this was the first private entity requesting to close Main Street as a major thoroughfare for traffic, it's not a precedent that anyone was interested in setting, aside from 5Ks. Those are a little bit shorter, mobile, that kind of thing. So this is an event that we understand that happens at every Elevation Church location. So that is not something we understand that the church has an option to participate in or not. So they are looking for an alternative location to host this event. And since it's the case that we do not rent out entire parks, a roadway that is close by to the church is their objective. So we have presented to you sort of their first choice, but my understanding is that they just want to leave here with somewhere that they can host this event on this date, and the pastor is here if any additional questions arise that he can answer for us.
I have a question. So just to understand in regards to what we can kind of rent or what you can reserve and what you can't. So just kind of thinking this through, that's also a lot of parking in that area. Is it possible for them to utilize the, I wouldn't even call it a gazebo, that big awning area above the Stowe Park, right next to the old middle school's football field up there, where we use,
On the
National Night Out was just there. I mean, is that not appropriate to use that?
This process has been under a lot of change in the last couple of months to a year. So that portion of the park does not have a fee schedule associated with it. We have used it for events in the past. That's just something that we have got to work through and figure out if that's acceptable or not.
There is the shelters and the pavilion that's listed in our fee schedule, so those shelters themselves can be rented, but like any, major aspect of the park or the upper field is not in the fee schedule. So we kind of limited to just those areas.
And the other untested portion of this is a private entity bringing in vendors, bounce houses, things like that. So the liability and insurance there is somewhere we've also not fleshed out how that process could or should work.
Right.
Yeah, it's an important consideration.
Yeah. How many, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, people are we anticipating, or are you anticipating at this event?
Between
If you could come up to the microphone. Thank you. We're gonna put you on.
my first city council meeting, like
That's-
ever. Yes, so thank you all so much for your time and for your service as well. So the nature of our block party, as you know, Cassie was mentioning, is obviously something that is requested all our campuses one time a year participate in. I can't choose the day, anything like that. So just trying to figure out whatever way we can do it. We are banking on trying to have after our 9:30 experience, probably anywhere around 500 people be a part of it, and then after our 11:30 experience, probably anywhere around 400 people is what we're expecting in attendance that day, which would put, I know the pavilion you're talking about that's up at the top, right by the big open area. I would be totally open to that big open area that's up there as well. Just not sure of the process to connect those things. I would like to say on the Mill Street, that's right there alongside the street, I know when we talked about that, we would only actually be removing access to 16 parking spots because it wouldn't be the entire street. It would be from Main Street to the point where you actually have access to the main big lot. So it would only be the few that are on the street right there. So it's only a small section of that street we would be looking to host our event, just for.
Well, what
Couple of
about?
questions. So, for instance, Old Stone Steakhouse.
Mhm.
It looked like there wouldn't be any access to their lot, correct?
So we talked with, is it Matt?
Matt.
Yeah, so we talked with Matt and we talked with, John at Sammy's next door. John, I mean, obviously hasn't been super excited for us to be there at all, so I've been trying to, incorporate just good relationships. We do, purchase from him for our volunteers, pretty regularly as well, but, that particular lot, correct. I wasn't sure if there was access on the backside. Old Mill was not concerned about us even using the lot because they're not open on that day. But I understand he also has kind of a verbal agreement with John at Sammy's for some of his employees to work there as well. So we said, we would be willing to reserve some spots in the other lot for his employees to meet as well.
So, a couple of other questions. You say 500 people, that's an enormous amount of people concentrated in this very small area.
Mm-hmm.
What is kind of the schedule of activities you anticipate with this event?
We're distributing, when we say vendors, we won't, if we have a food truck, I've not had great experiences with food trucks. They tend to be pretty slow when you're trying to feed a significant number of people. So normally what we'll do, we will probably order, we will cater our own, burgers, hot dogs, things like that, where everybody gets free drinks, free that, probably bounce houses, maybe a water slide near the bottom of the hill there. We're dealing with more of a flat area. Face painting, maybe a little basketball hoop, that kind of thing. And again, this would be, while it is a private entity, we're paying for putting the event on, it would be open to the community. So it's not private and that people can't participate. We want people to be able to participate as well.
So, economically, if you're going to feed the guests there, I don't imagine there's going to be much of a significant economic impact to our businesses in and around Mill Street and Main Street. Is that right? Positive.
As far as a positive thing, we will, other than Sammy's, like I let him know that we would probably cater a degree of wings coming directly from his entity because we work with him pretty regularly. With us feeding folks, it wouldn't necessarily. I would not assume they'd be going to eat lunch that day.
Where are you getting the food from? So you're gonna bring in the food?
Yeah.
Where are you gonna get it from?
I have some of my staff are involved on the actual event, that side of the food and vendors and some of that as well.
I'm curious, because we heard when the church originally opened, an estimate of X number of attendees that they projected. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the number turned out to be significantly more, over 2 services.
Well, I'm so sorry, what was the number that you had been expected, or?
I remember the final numbers were about 800 over 2 services on Sunday mornings on average.
We were only at 6.
Okay. So, parking obviously is a concern in that area. The 500 people that you anticipate, how is that invitation going out? How do you limit that? What happens if 800 people show up? You
Yeah,
I think the goal is to have as many people as possible,
Yeah,
right?
the goal would be just any evangelistic effort. We want to make sure that we have a goal to reach people with the gospel. So that's our goal. Like, we want to be able to, as many people as can fit in the building.
Sure.
Keep in mind.
I don't regret that at
Yeah,
all.
yes, sir, yes, sir.
And certainly, you know, we're not gonna have the miracle of the loaves and the fish. I mean, we're gonna have to feed them, yeah.
Absolutely, that's on us, as a church, we are always prepared, we always go way over for that very case, we never want somebody to show up. So,
I have some questions.
Yeah.
How often are you gonna have these events?
Is it,
Once a year.
It's an
Is
annual
it
event.
Once a year,
Mm,
you're
yeah,
asking to
the-
close the road?
it's kind of new territory for us as a church, right? This is the first one where we have partners run Main Street. Most of the time we have land that's put somewhere. Just so everybody knows, I am new to the campus as of April. So I moved from another campus once our campus pastor stepped out. So I'm still in the process of learning some of the things, reestablishing relationships with some of the folks. So I wasn't in the process of picking a location, building anything, but I'm here to help steward what we have. So that said, I'm so sorry, what was the question?
How often you were gonna have?
Oh, just once a year for now. We're
For now?
obviously wanting to be able to be as invested, involved in the different events that are already happening in the community. We spent some time actually today planning out the next quarter. There's nothing that will, any events. We actually want to be a part of the Christmas lighting ceremony. We want to be part of the Boo Fest, I think, that's coming up. So any ways that our volunteers can jump in and be invested in the community as well. We're just realizing we don't have the same footprint and access to massive parking lots that we have and all that. So we're learning. We're learning how to adjust based on the area that we're in. And so we're wanting to be as good neighbors as we can. This is one that was on there that we might take a look at next year and realize, hey, we have to do something different based on where we're at as well. So we're flexible. We're just a couple months in. I'd be remiss if we didn't come to you guys and figure out, is there a way to make both happen for this one day.
Have you guys had these events before? Has Elevation had these events like last year?
Not at
Yes.
this location.
Not
I
at this location.
understand not at Belmont,
Yeah.
but last year, so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Block
you
parties
guys
been happening
knew you
since
were
about
gonna have
2017.
Right, so you knew you were gonna have events when you bought that, establishment in Belmont, right?
I'm assuming that the powers that be did.
Right, so I think that's where I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it, is you guys did, I'm assuming you did your due diligence when you bought that place, you understood what the schematics were and how many people you could have, and then it just seems like there was no thought put into what you were gonna do for events. So now, it seems as if you were just expecting us to allow you to use the streets.
I can't speak, I'm not in the rooms, I'm not in any of the financial things, I'm just here to help pastor community.
Right.
I will say, I don't have any expectation, that's why I just pitched an application, I'm here, ultimately you guys make the decision. So I'm here not wanting to, the board, not trying to club anybody over the head, I'm just doing my due diligence to try to show up and say, is there a way we can partner this way for this one event? And if there's not a space, there's not a space.
How many campuses does your church have?
19.
And you said this one is unique in that it's in the downtown area, that the other ones all have the ability to
Yes, sir.
do this perhaps on their property or whatnot.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
For insurance, like, is that something we could whip up before September the 8th? I mean, ideally, that would make more sense. We could put stipulations on not allowing food trucks or whatever it is that we would want to do. Because I do think this would be a great opportunity to, minister to the community, but I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence too. And I get why we're concerned about Mill Street. I think that is going to be pretty cramped for the event, but I think the field would be a phenomenal spot if we could figure out how to, what type of insurance policy would cover those things for the city. Like, what would that look like?
Well, Miles, are there any issues with the field? I mean, I know we're trying to implement our fee schedule and make sure that these areas that we're renting are on the fee schedule. And if the park's not on the fee schedule, is that a problem?
Well, given that there's no fee, we might have to establish a fee, or you all would say that there's no fee associated with the league. they have their insurance adjusters look at it for us, and then basically state, making sure the applicant has the appropriate general liability coverage. And I think ours is $5 million per event, and so we could ask that their certificate of insurance is the same. If they're gonna have like a bouncy house, we could ask, is it allowed to have a bouncy house on city property that somebody else is managing? More than likely that one might be a little bit trickier, so we could have certain things where insurance may say, no, we prefer not to have a bouncy house. No, we prefer not to have a rock climbing wall, something that somebody could get injured on city property. So, we would take their information if that's the direction y'all like and pass that up, get the information and then bring it back to you all.
Just a few things here, because that's where I was trying to go with that as well. I think my main concern is that kind of the safety. If we're gonna have a lot of people, and I can't remember which Jason, Charlie, or Jim, but someone just said, cramming a bunch of people on the street. It's not a bit more isolated and away from street exposure there.
Absolutely, and we would have preferred the park and those spaces first, but after it was telling, hey, these things aren't available to us, we were just trying to find what can we do to play nice and keep the parking and all that. So yeah, absolutely, I agree.
And then just another note. Now, it happened before me. I guess, Jim, you would have been on council, but the only thing, and kind of speaking with Miles too and others in the community, the only precedent we've really established with private street closures, I believe, was during COVID, during like the Olive Carte, when we were trying to promote social distancing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, outside of the city's organizations as well, through DPPA and Oregon and stuff like that. But I can think, a concern is setting precedent and stuff like that. So again, for me, I probably won't support the Mill Street closure, but I think it's important that staff kind of looks and see what we can do about the field. It looks like our next council meeting is September 2nd, when we would meet. I don't know if that would be
September 3rd, I think.
Yeah, Labor Day.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. So September 3rd. So I don't know if that gives us enough time or not. That would just be my concern there.
It could, yep. If
Okay.
that's the direction y'all would like to direct staff, then definitely we'll get with the applicant.
I'm a little nervous about even that, but,
The time.
well, I'm, as a lawyer, I worry more about, the establishment clause and the First Amendment, and, given that this is a religious organization. Parks, you remember the Wiccans? Remember, weren't they running around a few years ago? Did they get a
permit.
They had a permit?
They were running.
They were down here.
Yeah.
At Kevin Lofton Park. They did receive a permit.
They did receive a permit? Oh, I think on these guys, but, I believe as long as, it's treated even-handedly, but I'm just saying that, this is the sort of thing that if we did, and then the weekends came along, or various different denominations, we can't play favorites. We can't endorse a particular church or religion.
Good point.
So, again, just, I want to flag that issue. And maybe Parks, how would you like to write a memo on the establishment clause? Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah, not too fond of that.
Yeah. But I just, that just makes me a little bit nervous. Just like when we have, you're allowed, and I've actually done some research on this, you can have the invocation given by a member of a religious denomination at a council meeting, but you have to open it up to everyone, and it has to be rotated around, et cetera, so you can't favor one or the other.
Anyway.
Yeah, like, you don't want to get in that thicket, but.
So you think that presents a barrier to even doing it?
Well, it just makes me nervous, but I mean, if we gave the weekends a permit, I don't see why we couldn't give another denomination permit as well.
Talking about to the park.
To the park, yeah.
Well, we've changed since the Wiccans came. We actually have a different process that we use for special event applications and in the areas that we can rent. I would say that we would not want to amend the fee schedule to include parks. I think this is probably a one-off direction from council. I don't think that I'll go back and say I recommend, like, we charge X for the park. I think that opens us up for anybody to come forward with applications. So I think would be a one-off condition that I would take the direction discretion from council with, but not recommend to change anything on the fee schedule at all.
To your point though, if we start doing one-offs,
Yeah.
you can't,
Mm,
kind of open up Pandora's box there.
yeah.
It's just not an ideal situation, right? Like, I want you to be able to do this, trust me, I want you to be able to do this. I think it's a great thing, that you're doing.
What do we do I knew
I'm
coming
just trying
into
to
the
think
location,
ideas.
this conversation has to happen at least once. So this is where we're going, and hopefully this helps set, determine what we do
Let me
moving
ask you
forward.
this, because
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Just voting on.
I would say
I don't remember
the ordinance that's presented.
Sorry.
Mill Street.
Correct, that's what's presented, that's what's before.
it was a couple years ago, but was there not an elevation church using Forest View High School?
Yes.
So same campus, they were using Forest View, and then they moved, I wasn't a part, obviously it was a few months ago, but Forest View and then Gaston Christian, and then in Christmas of this last year, we moved into the building.
I mean, I understand the walkability, but have you guys thought about maybe reaching out to one of the schools or something like that? Because they've got the fields, I'm trying to help. But
Yeah.
like I said, the Mill Street situation, at least I don't know what the rest of council thinking, isn't gonna work for me, just because of the safety concerns I have for it. Because I think about kids, and you see them all the time at Friday Night Lights, we shut off Main Street, right? So if you're veering off or running off, this is a little bit more confined. If the field is not gonna work through the city, I'm just spitballing, throwing out, I don't know if the school or something like that would be
Yeah, I mean, that's the
open to it.
thing is this is a block party, does that mean it has to be contiguous to the campus, or could it be somewhere else?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yes, that's the precedent that's been set, like, we want people to walk out of church
Yes.
directly into, which was why we talked about, of course, I'm never worked on a Main Street or anything before. Oh, cool! Like they shut stuff down all the time. Like we could do this. So obviously, just being ignorant of some of the laws and the so. But if I don't want to delay the council any further than what's necessary. Even if this had to push all the way to the third, at that point, it's not enough time for our team to be able to put something together effective that's helpful. That it's a level we would want even to be demonstrated in the community. Right? This is pretty late for what we would normally be several months in the making at this point. So. So I'll say if it feels like it's got to be obviously a conversation for you guys to continue figuring out, not just with us, but as this inevitably shows up in the future, if we can be of any help. In the meantime, it is just something that I'll have to take it on the chin and maybe look at again an alternative option off. It's unlikely we will do a block party then, and we'll have to just give hot dogs on the way or something like that at the door. So we'll figure it out. It's the nature of being the new guy in town, figuring the stuff out, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Have
parking
you
lot.
have you guys tried the parking lot aspect of it?
The parking lot is, the problem with the parking lot is public parking, and
Gravel lot,
and it's a pretty steep incline there. And the other side is, we can't afford to, as much as any of the other, we can't afford to lose the parking with event-based stuff there, is the problem.
But, well,
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful bustling town that's got a lot of need for people coming in, so we felt
Well,
as
you
if we all.
recognize the challenge.
Absolutely,
This location
absolutely.
versus the others, you don't have a large campus where you could have it
Absolutely.
on your ground. The mission of the event.
Absolutely.
And for safety reasons, I couldn't support it downtown, but also I couldn't
Right.
support it because of the impact it's gonna have on our neighboring businesses. I think there's already an element of that already, and I wouldn't be able to support. I mean, it'd be one thing if you could somehow, craft a schedule that's gonna somehow incorporate a benefit to our neighboring businesses, but I don't hear that. But yeah, I just think that the school is maybe an option. I don't know if that's anything you guys could explore, but I couldn't support it downtown. The park is perhaps an option. I don't know if there's hurdles there that we could overcome, but I couldn't support it at the downtown location on the street.
Well, it seems as though, the question before us, as Charlie was asking, this is an ordinance to close Mill Street on the day in question for this block party. To the extent discussions might continue, I think you sort of have a sense that, we're not, we were not ill-disposed towards you, but we do have concerns downtown about safety in our downtown businesses and whatnot. So to the extent the conversations can continue, whether that's practical or not, but, this is what's before us tonight. And I'm not sure there's a need for further, discussion if anyone wanted to call a question.
Again, echoing what everyone said, because this is sensitive, I mean, I appreciate what you guys are doing, I think it's great. For us, it's just looking at it kind of as a big, like, wholer picture from the safety perspective and everything, the businesses as well. But Jim, are you looking for a motion of denial?
Well, I'm looking for something, I'm not putting words in your mouth, whatever.
I'll make the motion to deny the ordinance authorizing the closing of streets during Elevation Church Block Party.
I second that.
All right, motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor of the, is there anything?
Well, Jason,
Yes.
step down.
Well, how is that recorded
In favor,
if he's not here, he's just,
Just wait.
Yeah.
all right, well, this way. All right. We'll hold it now.
Hey, folks, thank you for your time. I know the direction is going. I gotta pick my kids up.
No,
So y'all be blessed. Have a great time.
Thank you.
Look forward to meeting some of y'all in the near future.
Your name.
Matt, yeah. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
thank you, good night.
I hope your leadership will understand if you're the only one out of my team that is in such a location with these issues.
The biggest thing, if I took it as far as I possibly could, and this is where I washed my hands. I'm good.
Yeah.
I did my part.
Well, you
Thank you
walk
guys.
up against
Thank you
like
guys.
pilot, I'm good.
Get your babies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Anyway, clap.
Well,
We've had a microphone taken.
yes.
Should we grab a microphone?
When, well,
What was the pastor's name again?
Matt.
Matt. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very, very nice.
We have a motion. We have a motion on the table made by Alex, seconded by Charlie to deny the ordinance authorizing the closure of Mill Street on September 8th for the Elevation Church Block Party. All those in favor of the motion to deny? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ordinance is denied. All right, thank you, everyone. Now we have item C2, which is our quarterly finance update. Jared Piles, our finance director, will be handling this item unless there's any, do you have any preparatory comments, Miles? Or just, all right, off you go, Jared.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Just ready to. So we'll just jump right in. All right, so this is a snapshot of our revenue across all three major funds: general fund, water sewer fund, and the stormwater fund. I'll start with the general fund. It was exceptionally strong in fiscal year '24. Sales tax came in $770,000 above what was budgeted. Property tax came in approximately $2.8 million over anticipation. Do keep in mind the city appropriated approximately $1.1 million in fund balance in fiscal year '24, which will have a net effect, lower effect on the transfer of fund balance at year end. But we still expect approximately a $2 million increase in unrestricted fund balance to $13.3 million of available unassigned fund balance, which is near 60% of the city's 2025 general fund budget. So, and really good financial health there in the general fund. Any questions pertaining to general fund revenue?
You're summarizing what we're looking at currently.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Any questions on general fund revenue?
I guess this was a question I had both on the revenue and expenses. Obviously, there was some variances there in terms of the revenue, what was collected and received versus budgeted, and then with expenses, what's been encumbered and expended versus budgeted. Just generally speaking, can you kind of speak to that? And some of those numbers are pretty significant, but.
As far as budget deficits, or?
Well,
probably other general fund
Yeah.
revenue as an example,
Yeah.
remaining budget, negative 1.3 million.
So that means we came in over what we anticipated, and then I probably should, Miles brought this to my attention last time when I brought this up, but
Take a little deeper dive.
yeah, so the amended budget showing that we were expecting to bring in 1.1 million, we actually brought in 2.4 million.
What's driving that, just out of curiosity?
Charges for services, could be fund balance appropriations that were in the budget originally, things that are not usual, well, like I guess charges for services, usual income stream. But your ad valorem taxes are property taxes. Intergovernmental revenue is local option sales tax, utility franchise tax, beer and wine tax. Other general fund revenue would also include ABC fund distributions or ABC board distributions, things of that nature. So came in over budget this year.
No, I mean, that's great, but it's just
Yeah.
quite, it's a large number. I mean,
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, I was just curious what it is. We didn't budget for it, and we didn't anticipate it.
Sometimes we bring in, so like traffic impact, I guess the combination of all those together this year just came in over what was anticipated. That's the best way that I can describe it. Good economy.
Like with the water and sewer fund, non-recurring revenue, that I, budgeted 1.2 million, collected and received 2,000.
The 1.2 million on non-recurring revenue in the water sewer fund was a fund balance appropriation to balance the budget last year, which we did not need to use. So we actually came in basically break even in the water sewer fund this year. We're rolling about $100,000 into fund balance this year, but that was going to be utilized to balance the budget if needed. We didn't need to do it.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll jump right into water sewer if we're okay. Water sewer fund performed better than expected. Brought in 9.6 million in revenue, spent 9.5. Little to no effect on unrestricted fund balance, but again, we have a plan in place to continue providing high level of service with implementation of the rate study changes for this, starting this fiscal year and onward with that 10-year plan, if you remember from that presentation a few months ago. Any other additional questions on water sewer?
I mean, again, just more of a broad question, because I remember when we were looking at this last one, we were doing the budget, right? We were operating in a deficit. Is it just, what's the performance like? You know what I mean? It's pretty stagnant. X amount of people pay X amount a month or so. So I'm just kind of curious. I know the expenses vary, but.
From a revenue stream, it's been pretty consistent as far as a percent annual. You have additional development coming online, potential additional commercial use. Again, we have not increased the rates, but I think a huge factor, especially for us moving forward, is our billing practices. We've been doing a lot better job of capturing unbilled consumption, coming through variance reporting to make sure that what bills we're sending out are accurate, that we're billing for accurate consumption. So I think that's going to be a big driver for us, especially moving forward, and especially having an established team with customer service up front. I've been really proud of their work over the last 6 months.
And I know we can change it anytime, and of course you need data, but does that not skew the sewer study or the rate study that we just did?
I don't believe so, no.
Because what I'm getting at, we don't want to charge the residents too much, and if we're now starting to see revenues start pacing in at a more favorable pace, we shouldn't just overcharge the citizens.
Sure, but we're going to take this as a year-to-year approach.
Yeah.
So we'll look at year 1, 2025. We also have a CIP plan that's incorporated with that rate study, not just general operating expenditures.
Mhm.
So there's a 5-10-year CIP plan that was also analyzed along with that rate study to make sure that we had funding to be able to fund those projects. And again, we can always change that and look at that year to year, and we do that in the budget process anyhow.
Mhm.
So again, we'll just see how 2025 looks, and then we can make adjustments if needed from there.
That's okay. That's fine. I appreciate it, Jared.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
And lastly, for revenue, stormwater fund performed similarly to 2023. In 2024, we brought in $869,000 compared to $833,000 in 2023. And did want to point out that although a budget amendment was approved to appropriate fund balance for the new street sweeper, the fund basically was able to sustain and cash flow that truck. So I anticipate rolling approximately $330,000 into fund balance, which is similar to the $363,000 in the prior year.
That's great.
Any questions on stormwater? Here are the general fund expenditures. I did want to point out a typo that I made on general fund capital. The expended and budget remaining columns are backwards. So we had spent 1.4, have 511 remaining, not the other way around. Yeah. So I caught that as I was making my notes. But I did also want to point out that we did our final field work started our final field work for our fiscal year 24 audit last week. As part of that, I did make some adjustments to general fund capital, and remaining in that budget is $180,000 now versus the 511. Yep. All in all, though, general fund as a whole and per department came in under budget. That also is in part due to the budget amendment that we passed at the regular council meeting the first week of August. Any questions in the general fund expenses?
Maybe just a comment, and
Currently, there's very limited revenue in that fund, and that's partially why that transfer is there. As part of the budget amendment that was passed the first week of August, was a transfer from the general fund to the Abbey Creek Greenway to shore up the budget deficit that has been in place in that fund for several years, and we've been getting audit findings for that. So to make that go away, we have to have a funding source or revenue to offset the expenditures that have already been incurred in that account. If, for example, the council decided we don't want to proceed with that project anymore, this fund balance transfer would have had to have taken place, even just to close the project altogether. So this was necessary on multiple levels for that transfer.
Miles, is it possible to put that on a future agenda if everyone else is okay with that? That one's just been sitting there.
Well, yes, but I'm not sure whether there's certain funds that have to be, I know that's the case with the rail trail, so I don't know if that's one you were thinking.
Oh, maybe I was thinking of that.
That there's certain, I think federal monies were provided that have to be used.
It's like CMAQ funds for the.
Okay, that might be the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, we can provide a presentation on book Greenway.
Well, it might be useful, because
This
we have a lot of
council
new council members.
Haven't talked about that. It was pretty contentious.
Yep. So to speak to your question, I just pulled up the project fund in our financial statements. What's been budgeted there is $505,000 in grant revenue
Mhm.
and $1.6 million in long-term debt.
And we had that turned on in the financial calculator?
Yes.
For the budget?
Yeah, I think we had to choose between one and that's right, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, the Belmont Rail Trail project is still active, and it will continue to be presented in our financial statements until it's decided to be closed. So it can have no activity for forever until a decision.
Well, it can't have no activity.
Yeah, it's got an expiration date.
Yeah.
Jim, I think we should have that on a workshop or something to talk about.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll add it to the queue.
Please.
Any other questions on general fund expenditures?
The planning department seemed to come in, let's see here. It seemed to have a lot of budget remaining.
They have some open roles. Yeah.
Yeah.
That and the comprehensive land use plan, which we're rolling that forward.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. Well, I thought it was comprehensive plan use plan. Okay. All right. Any other questions on expenses for general fund?
Water sewer fund did, just want to speak to Jonathan and his department and their supervisors. Did an excellent job monitoring, managing the budget, given the budgetary constraints due to revenue. But again, we are implementing better billing practices and that rate study that's going to continue to improve the financial health of the water sewer fund. There's a snapshot of what we spent in fiscal year 24. Any questions here? And for the stormwater fund, performed similarly to last year, as I said before, once again came in under budget. Any questions on stormwater?
No. Any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
So are we going to segue into this budget amendment as part of this discussion, or is that a separate agenda item?
The budget amendment itself is a separate agenda item, but if you want to go through, at this point, you go through.
Yeah, because it's just
Yeah,
part of the.
I have a presentation to roll, so.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Okay. just a little snap or precursor, per the U.S. Department of Treasury final rule, all ARPA funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. All those dollars must be spent by December 31st, 2026. Per conversation with Miles, we are recommending to obligate and spend the rest of ARPA funds on current year salaries. This is allowable under the final rule and the city's election of revenue replacement. Retirement and benefits, however, would still be needed to be funded, but with the city's operating budget, which is already budgeted for. What this is going to do is we are going to inject ARPA money into our salary line items. That's going to free up dollars that would in theory roll to fund balance if we did not use it, but it fulfills the role in that way we've spent it, got it out of our hair, and we can move forward.
And we have that extra money to spend on something else.
That is correct, yes.
Be sure to remind us. Because
Your unassigned fund balance will go up because of that.
Because obviously, I mean, this isn't the most, the sexiest thing to do with this money, but we certainly wanted to spend it, and
Correct, especially given what we have left, and that's what I'm going to present on the next slide. I think it's imperative that we move forward with something, and I think this is the easiest way to just free up the money and move forward.
But I just want to make sure that should a project come along, you know, that we recognize that, hey, we saved this money by doing this, we can, you know, we can use the money saved to.
Sure, and you will see the net impact of that in fund balance following the 2025 fiscal year.
Is that, so if I look at the 2024 numbers for admin, that was about 1.5 is what was budgeted?
In 2024 expenditures?
Yeah, budgeted. 1,525,000.
That's correct.
So we have an ARPA balance of 1.6 and change, right?
Mhm.
So there'll be some residual left over that we would apply somewhere else.
Well,
Or you have raises and things, I guess, that are gonna soak up that.
On the next few slides, I'll show you how we're going to break that up.
Oh, okay.
Break that up.
Sorry.
It's going to be amongst multiple funds, not just the general fund.
Okay.
So here's a snapshot of our ARPA balance. We got 2 tranches of funding, totaling approximately $4 million, and during that time, it has been sitting in a North Carolina Capital Management Trust account, earning interest, and today we've earned $165,000 in interest. I did not mark that as complete because that money is still sitting in there, and it will sit in there until we spend it. So theoretically, that number could increase, and we would have additional available funding to spend. Below there is the projects that we have funded to date, including stormwater projects, the Stowe Park restrooms. We did a one-time bonus back in, I believe that was fiscal year 23, where council elected to provide $1,500 to select employees making under a certain threshold. We did $20,000 from Across the Merge, fire pay in the last fiscal year, Kevin Lofton Park playground units, and the North Belmont booster pump station. The $1.3 million there is total obligated for that upgrades that are going to be needed for that, along with throughout the city, but that is a separate ask above and beyond what's listed there. And as you can see, we have additional $1.6 million remaining in ARPA fund. So for the proposed allocation for salary expense, what I did is I took the 2025 adopted budget and created a percentage of the total salaries of the fund and multiplied that by the 1.6 to determine allocation of salaries across each fund. I hope that makes sense. So that's how I came up with how we would split the 1.6 using the obligation that I described. Any questions here?
So we have until it's 26, December 31st. So it's got to be obligated by the end of this year.
That's correct, spent by the end of 26.
Just for point of clarification for me, does it make any difference whether if we identified other potential, capital needs that qualified for ARPA fund balance to be used for? Does it matter if we fund it from there or out of general fund?
No, it doesn't matter, and really, we could even tinker with this and pull it away from salaries if there was a designated project that we wanted to do,
Or is it just
for purposes of
one
this.
pocket to the other, right?
Right, for purposes of this presentation and for conversations with Miles and freeing up this money and the reporting requirements and getting it spent, we decided
Sure.
we would do it, but,
And we'd have to identify that project in the next.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
sure.
right.
But I didn't know,
But I would prefer that be identified probably within the next 3 months so that I have time to prepare and
Yeah.
and have reporting deadlines met.
I was just wondering if there was any advantage.
I think it's an important point, I think, that Jason's trying to drive at, because when I was first reading this, when I got the packet, initially you're thinking, okay, so you're just gonna spend the remaining of your ARPA fund, 1.6 million on salaries and stuff. But essentially, we still have the $1.6 million, it's just in the general fund, because we would have paid that regardless.
Mhm.
So I just wanna make that clear, that the 1.6 is still there for projects, and
Sure.
now it's actually unconstrained. Because,
Correct.
for example, the
Right.
ARPA, you couldn't do road
That's correct.
improvements and things like that, and there were some other weird things you couldn't do. But I just think it's very important that we hit home, this isn't just taking the rest of this remaining funds and just
Sure.
spending it, it's, we still have it. So I just wanted to.
Yes, sorry if I,
No, you did great, it's,
Okay.
I just wanted to put it in layman terms and
Yeah.
clarify.
so again, any questions with this allocation? And this would lead up into what would be the budget amendment based on these allocations. So if there's no further questions, that's pretty much all I have.
Any further questions on the finance report?
Good job, Jared, I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I know we've been asking for this for a long time prior to certain council members, Jared's been awesome about
Yes.
preparing this
I
stuff.
really have.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Good job, thank you. But if you would just stay up there while we discuss the budget amendment, because I might have.
Is that the next item?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yes. All right, so we will transition seamlessly from item C2, the quarterly finance update, to item C3, the fiscal year 2025 budget amendment number 1, which picks up where you left off with our discussion of the allocation of the ARPA funds. And so I guess my question is just to sort of explain this, the process of the amendment, because, you know, I don't want people to think, like Alex is saying, that somehow this, with the way it's assigning revenues and expenditures, we're not giving out more money, you know, everyone's not getting more money, just sort of explain how this all works to offset everything and end up, you know, where we're supposed to be.
Sure. From a budgetary standpoint, all this funding is in a completely separate fund. It's in the American Rescue Plan Fund. And in order to get it out, we have typically authorized budget amendments to transfer to the parent fund of which the expenditure is going to occur. So in this instance, we're going to be allocating monies to the general fund, water sewer fund, and the stormwater fund to cover salary expenditures that were already budgeted in the original budget ordinance. And it will free up general fund, water sewer, and stormwater dollars to do whatever the council really authorizes to do. I can also keep track of the expenditures throughout the year to ensure we don't go over appropriation of what's coming out of ARPA. And then I also can provide an additional update we may, but I will follow up on that at a later time.
I think that would be nice to kind of track that, if it's not too much work.
Absolutely, no, it won't be.
Kind of see that once it's spent, and then, you know, kind of matches what we took out of the ARPA balance.
And just one more point of clarification as well. So, when the freed up money goes into fund balance, it's not there just for anybody spending. If you all want a project, it would be a budget amendment at that time to spend the money down from fund balance. So it's not like it's just sitting there, we can spend the money however we'd like. It still has to come back to you all through a budget amendment, you can spend that. Just want to make that point.
I mean, let me ask you this, just to get ahead of it, and maybe it's a different conversation, but, okay, so we get the $1.6 million spent down from ARPA, we're good there, we've collected our full, $4 million and whatever change from the federal government. This 1.6 that we would have already have spent on salaries is now just gonna sit in the general fund as unrestricted, or it's just.
Unrestricted fund balance, but again, it's not all general fund dollars.
Right.
There's a little bit.
Right, yes.
Mhm.
Where I'm going with this, would it not make sense, because the original intent for ARPA, at least when we were deciding, it was try to knock off projects needed? Could we not just go ahead and get in front of this and do a budget amendment and allocate the $1.6 million across the other different funds and appropriate the capital funding? The reason why I say this is because at the retreat, I kind of was too, so just a thought.
What do you think?
Let me think more about it before we actually commit ourselves, or you commit yourselves to that. Let me talk to Jared and Kevin before we actually make that recommendation to come back. We could come back and say, yes, that would be appropriate, but let me think through if there's any complications by doing that, if we're
Yeah.
setting ourselves up for failure in the future, so let me just think.
That being the case, would we need to table this budget amendment to, or would that discussion have any effect on?
No.
No, I just voted.
No, I don't think it would, because it's just gonna be sitting.
Yeah, just gotta fund balance, whether it's in,
But I would, like, if we have the consent, I would like
I agree.
to have that conversation.
We definitely have a shortage of projects we want to try to
Yeah.
start knocking off.
What would likely happen there is we would pass this budget amendment, it would have that money freed up, and then we would have to do another budget amendment to move it from salaries to wherever we're gonna fund the project. That's probably what would need to happen there.
And
That would also be driven by you all.
Anything further? Then I think it would be appropriate for a motion to approve the budget amendment number one.
I'll make a motion to approve budget amendment number one.
Motion made by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, budget amendment presentation. Jonathan.
Thank you. So tonight's the presentation on the water and sewer asset management plan. In 2022, the city was awarded a grant for the water asset inventory and assessment and the sewer asset inventory and assessment from North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. These two grants totaled $300,000. It was $150,000 for each, the water and then also the sewer. And then since January 2023, the city's been working with Withers Ravenel to complete this inventory and assessment, which had several components and deliverables associated with them. We updated the water and sewer map books. We developed a 10-year CIP, which came to City Council with the budget process earlier this year, and then also developed an asset management plan. And tonight, Withers Ravenel is here to present that information to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. I first want to take a second and express our sincerest condolences for the loss of Mayor Turner. Just wanted to say that before I get started.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Casey Dolan, and I'm here with Withers Ravenel, and I'm here with some of my colleagues as well. And this evening, I'm going to be presenting the information, like Jonathan said, about the water and sewer AIA planning grant work that our firm was able to do with the city of Beaumont. So here you see the list of the topics that I'm going to be going through tonight. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the work that we did as part of this project and how you all can use this work moving forward to continue your asset management. So like Jonathan mentioned, AIA stands for Asset Inventory and Assessment, and this is a grant that is provided by the state that they provided to water and sewer utilities to help them move along their asset management and get their systems to be able to run more efficiently. And like Jonathan mentioned, you all got $150,000 for your water system and also $150,000 for the sewer system. So I'm going to be talking about what we did with that money. So an asset management plan is really to have an asset management plan, you have to answer these 5 questions, which are what assets do we have and where are they located? What is the condition of these assets? What assets are essential to our system to work well? How should we maintain and improve these assets? And where should we invest our money and how do we invest it? So, like Jonathan mentioned, prior to this project, one of the largest challenges that the city of Beaumont faced was that there was not a comprehensive digital water map of the water system. And through this project, we were able to use a combination of records review, some field work in the North Belmont area, and gathering some of staff knowledge to create that usable digital map that is now accessible for city staff to use. And here you can see an image of that map that you all have now. And similarly, the sewer system. Prior to this project, there was not a full comprehensive sewer map of the system that was in a digital format. And using a combination of records review and staff knowledge, we were able to compile that digital usable map book that city staff now has to better manage their sewer system. And much like water, you can see an image of that map here on the screen. So now following this project, the city has a good inventory and with detailed maps of the water and sewer system. And here on the screen, you can see the inventory summary of both the water system at the top in blue and the sewer system at the bottom in green.
That's a quick question.
Yes.
Before we get too far to the road, I think there's a lot to go over. Do you find it unusual, for a city our size, that we do not have an existing map for water and sewer? Is that unusual?
I would say no. Unfortunately, it's not that unusual.
Okay.
My life's work is to try and prevent that from happening in
Yeah,
the future.
that's definitely an asset to have.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not super unusual,
Okay.
but that's what we do, try and prevent that from happening and try and get everyone in better shape there.
Just to comment on that, because again, I want to safeguard staff and stuff. This is primarily or mainly caused by, most of this being held by private entities like the mills and stuff like that prior, right? With not as good like record keeping and stuff like that. Think about the water plant used to be owned by Arl Stone Mills. I'm assuming they did the servicing for the houses and stuff. So it's not on our staff, that's just
No.
an inheritance
I
of
was
multiple
curious.
issues and stuff like that.
Sort of sorry, I didn't mean to try.
No.
Presentation.
So the next thing that we were able to do once we had kind of that comprehensive map is that we did a condition assessment. So for the water system, we primarily used pipe age and staff feedback to determine the condition of those distribution mains and the valves. And then for the condition assessment of the tanks, we used those condition assessment reports from Veolia to determine that condition. And here on the screen, you can see the summary of the results of that condition analysis. So similarly for sewer, we primarily used the pipe age or asset age and staff feedback to determine the condition of the gravity mains, force mains, manholes, and lift stations throughout the system. And again, on the screen, you can see a summary of the results of that condition analysis.
How do we know the unknown percentage?
So some of that is because we used the age of assets, and in the GIS, we're unable to determine the age, probably because, it was put in the ground and we didn't have, a record that showed or somebody who worked here. So rather than coming up with an age that we guessed, sometimes it's better to have unknown so that you can know when you do things like CCTV or other analysis, you can start there because you don't know much about it.
A couple questions.
Sure.
The assessment was based not only on the age, but also on staff observations and feedback. So necessarily that it was literally falling apart.
Right.
Yeah, what is the status of that? I mean, is it just based on an age, or when we say poor, does that really mean that we've got issues with those specific areas?
Sure. So for the most part, what we used was the staff age, and where that comes in with some of the staff feedback is there were some places where they either said, we know those areas are good, we've recently CCTV'd them, or we know those areas are poor, we've had a lot of breaks there. But especially with the sewer system, what we typically recommend is rather than jumping right into some of those replacement projects, is those are the first places that you all should do your next step of analysis, whether that is the CCTV to get a camera down there, because obviously we don't want to replace a pipe just because it's old. We want to make sure that we're replacing the ones that truly need it first.
And the same thing, you didn't assess really the conditions of the lift stations.
Correct.
That's in conjunction with what we approved earlier. Is that correct, Miles? That's capacity study is what's going to be looking at the lift stations in more details like you all recommended.
Correct.
sort of how they relate to each other. The capacity study is going that additional step that you recommended in terms of the lift stations and other.
Yes.
Okay.
Is the unknown percentage that we have, is that normal? Is that kind of, or is that ordinary?
So it's pretty typical to have some amount of unknown. You all have a pretty small amount of unknown from what I have seen. But obviously those would also be good ones if you're going to be doing some of those additional analysis. Put those in with the poor ones to get some eyes on the pipes.
And let me sort of echo Jason's question with the last slide. How does this compare to other municipalities that you've seen? I mean, is there too much in the poor category, or is this average, or oh my, it's running quite hard. You know, how do we stack up? I mean, obviously, we look at that and say, gosh, you know, almost 30% of gravity mains poor, you know, 30% of lift stations. Oh, we don't want our infrastructure to be in poor condition, but is this out of the ordinary, or?
I would say you all certainly are not part of out of the ordinary. I've certainly seen some municipalities that have 50 to 60% poor. I've also seen some that, you know, they have newer systems where things naturally fall less poor. But I would say you guys are well within the realm of, if we want to say, normal.
Is that you may see that the lift stations are in good condition, for example, but during their drawdown test, they may be that they're over capacity, so therefore it may show that, hey, we've got good equipment, we've got a good well, we've got all the good things, a good pipe, but during the study, it may show that there needs to be improvement based on that. So I don't think that they necessarily relate to like the poor fare good as it relates to what's coming up.
Right.
They all may be good, there may be issues associated with what we find in the future.
Right. I was just trying to understand and highlight the relationship between the two different studies. Sorry.
All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the criticality analysis that we did as part of this project. So for the water system, we identified areas that either don't meet current design standards or are serving the critical customers. And you can see the summary of the areas that we identified as critical there. And I always like to note here with those design standards, that doesn't necessarily mean if you are currently not meeting design standards that you have to go out and replace them. Those are just really important to note, that they're not currently meeting design standards, because when you do go to replace that, it does have to be brought up to design standards. So those aren't things you have to, you know, run out and do today, but just make note of.
Well, because I was curious as to that, the whole category was either not meeting design standards or near critical or serving critical infrastructure. And the one obviously seems bad. Well, it's not meeting current design standards. The other one doesn't necessarily strike me as bad. I mean, it's just a fact. It serves critical infrastructure. So
exactly.
I was curious as to why they were lumped together in that category when, you know, one seems bad, the other one is just a fact.
Sure. So a lot of what I like to describe the criticality is kind of the consequence of failure. So if you have those ones that are not currently meeting design standards, when they do fail, you have to give special care to them, because you can't just replace it as like for like. And obviously with the ones that are serving critical customers, if they were to fail, it would have more of an impact on the community when they do fail. So I like to kind of marry the condition and criticality so that you can identify the assets that are more at risk, if that makes sense.
Pretty much every school.
Yes. Right, so then we did the criticality analysis also for sewer. So along with doing the design standards and those close to critical customers, we also added in an analysis for assets that were not assets that were within the close proximity to natural waters. now that I've told you a lot of what we did in this project and what the results are, now you might be asking, what are we supposed to do with all of this? So during the course of this project, we met with the city staff and we reviewed the capital improvements projects. And during that review, we updated the priority for the existing projects, as well as discussing additional projects and their cost estimates that were identified by some of our analysis here. And this project list information is some of the things that Brandon actually briefed you all on back in February in your work session. And as well as having this table, we also created some maps of these areas and identified the cost estimates over the next 10 years. So then, some of the future or next steps that we like to mention and then working to perform some of that more in-depth condition analysis, especially on the sewer side with either smoke testing or CCTV inspection, to either to help identify some of additional capital projects that could be needed, and then work to continue performing more in-depth analysis of project costs, just due to some of the market instability, and combine some of the comprehensive planning efforts with growth and things like the capacity study to kind of understand where you all are growing to make sure your systems are ready for it. And always making sure that when you are doing some street repaving projects, that you keep in mind the water, sewer, or storm lines that may be under those roads, to consider pairing some of those projects up so that you don't have to dig up a perfectly good road. And then work to continue planning and budgeting annually, and then review kind of some of the funding strategies, just to make sure you guys aren't spending out of your funds things that you might be able to get a grant or low interest loan. So with that, I wanted to see if you all had any additional questions for me.
Any additional questions?
Miles, can you help me understand kind of where this study fits in with some of the other ones that we've either, agreed to move forward with, or the one that was just done on the peninsula? Because this is citywide.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also about to approve or consider a capacity study for everything but the peninsula, right? So where does this fit in with those projects? I'm a little unclear on that.
So the capacity, this was not a capacity study, so they didn't go out and do flow monitoring for events such as today when we have like
Right.
rain and things taking place. So that's really the capacity side of it, is to see just like you've seen before, what is the existing flow, what's the future flow based on like certain rain events, certain storm events.
This is looking at existing assets.
This is existing assets, right? So this data kind of builds the CIP and prioritizes the projects we need to focus on first over the next 10 years. So this is the first steps to get to a greater 10-year plan is what this does for us.
Have we ever had one of these done before in the past? And if so, do you recall when?
I don't know that. Looking at staff, have we ever commissioned one of these studies before?
Not mine.
Well, clearly not one to do a GIS.
Yeah, not one that would incorporate the data that we have. I don't know if we've ever done like a condition assessment study in the past, but.
What would be your, I'm sorry.
He said grant funded project, so that's one of the important things that, we're considering is that, we didn't spend the city's dollars.
Right.
Not all the city's dollars to incorporate this study here, so we did get grant funds to help us
Yeah.
out through the process.
So it's definitely a valuable study.
What's your recommendation for a follow-up for this type of test throughout the city?
Sure. So it kind of depends where you are. With the state, you are eligible for another round of this AIA funding. So you could do more of those things like that CCTV or some flow monitoring if it's not, included with the capacity study and stuff like that. But you could do another round of that, or other types of analysis that you could, do a hydraulic model or things like that that can help you kind of identify what you have Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. I just want to make sure like we're proactive
Yeah.
moving forward with who we have here for years to come so that we don't have new council sitting in the same seat that we are today with the mess that we're handed. So I just think it's important that we do our due diligence and find out how often these things need to happen because, you know, obviously we're willing to put that in the budget if it is something that we need to take care of because we don't want our citizens having to pay out of their pocket for a mess that was created by people that sit at these desks. So,
Do you have a recommendation on that note about, you know, for a city our size and with the assets we have in the ground and elsewhere? Because that's a rolling time frame, right? Because you have assets in the ground and such that are different ages.
Sure.
How often do you recommend we do a study like this in your experience?
So honestly, my recommendation would be see if you can get another round of AIA funding, and you're eligible for those every 3 years.
Okay.
So with the conclusion of this project, as soon as you kind of hit the end, because we're presenting not at the end, because you have to finish the grant things. So once you hit the end, a lot of times I recommend doing that, trying to get another round of AIA as well. The AIA still exists. So.
Are we, and this might be towards you, Miles, are we applying for this since we're eligible again for this additional, or another round of this grant funding?
We hadn't started the process to apply for any AIA grant funding at this point that I'm aware of. 2, 3, you'll see. Jonathan is doing a good job there. So, I think like, you know, this kind of study also, kind of gives like the base layer if you're going out for any other funding sources to fix some of the items that they've identified. Most of the time, somebody will ask, you know, what have you done to prepare yourself? And if you just like are grabbing here and grabbing there, the things that are breaking, then
Right.
that's not, you know,
That's not
that's what study.
That's what it's reviewed, the study, yeah.
Yes, it's
like
kind of
a
like
full-
lays the baseline
Sure.
of moving forward so that we can actually go out. We've identified the areas that need improvement and what we can pay for versus like what's too great for our budget for the next few years, and then go out for grant funding for those items.
One,
Oh,
any other
sorry.
questions? I have just one. I was reading the report. Page 33, it says,
Dramatic layer.
no, not a dramatic. On page 33 of the report, among the suggestions is ensure Muffin Monster is working properly in remote and on positions. I'm just dying to know what a Muffin Monster is.
So that is kind of like a grinder that you can put in a manhole so that you can grind up anything that comes in. The description I've been given of a muffin monster is it can grind up a baseball. So if a baseball somehow gets into your sewer system, you obviously don't want that going through your pumps and things.
We recently made sure that it would. So that's good to know. Now, before we move on, I think there's a resolution in the agenda packet that we need to adopt, if agreeable to everyone, on these projects. So you all, it's the very last page of the packet. I entertain a motion regarding this resolution if you all feel that's so appropriate.
I'll make the motion, Jim.
Alex has made a motion to approve the resolution. Catherine seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Very good report, thorough report.
Thank you.
So that brings us to added agenda item C5, LED sign ordinance discussion. I guess I'll turn it over to Jason to sort of introduce the topic and we can discuss from there.
Well, again, this was kind of precipitated by a request from South Point High School because they were looking to replace the equipment inside the existing sign panel at the corner of South Point and Nixon. And they were asking some questions about permit requirements to do that. And so I spoke with Tiffany about that and we kind of looked at some of the language and it seemed to be a bit outdated in areas with some of the things. There's obviously some restrictions in there that I think are good and need to be maintained. But there are also some things, for instance, I can't remember this right offhand, but it seemed like the existing ordinance said that there's rotating messages on these signs, but it said that the message can't change more than once every, it was something really,
Specific.
I believe it's every 10 minutes, but I don't have that.
yeah, it was like 10 minutes. So if you're sitting at a red light, you're not gonna see more than the one message, right? Most likely. So little things like that. Also, I think there's a prohibition in the ordinance against having any kind of like neon colors and things, and interestingly, they said that their neighbors on Eagle Road get away with just about anything on their sign, but I guess the enforcement maybe, is something that's not, that maybe it's not as enforced, I don't know, but anyway, that, they're not looking to do any more than what is permitted, but they feel like some of these requirements are a little, confiscatory is not the right word, but a little, stringent, constrained. Onerous, thank you. So, I guess with that in mind, I thought it might be good to facilitate a discussion maybe between planning and zoning and South Point High School to kind of, see what they're looking to try to do, what they would like to do, what is permissible under the current code, what can maybe be modified, and maybe bring that back to us in the form of a text amendment, at the appropriate time. You guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, they don't have like a quick turnaround time on this one, right?
Well, so they're looking to spend about $40,000 on it, so it's a significant investment, and they're looking to do it just as soon as possible. So I said, I'd be willing to do whatever we can to kind of help fast track that, shepherd it through. But, I think that there's certain requirements, certain language in the existing ordinance that shouldn't take a lot of time to really decipher and see what we could, make a little more.
You don't have any idea what they're trying to do?
Well, I don't know how much detail you want to get into tonight, but like for instance, right now it's a monochromatic, so it's a black panel with red lettering, and that's it, right? Some LED signs in town permit multiple colors to be displayed. I think that's one of the restrictions actually right now, is that it does have to be monochromatic. As an example, to your question, he said what they'd like to do is if, let's say for instance, South Point's playing Ashbrook, Forest View's a better example. So maybe they want to have South Point's colors and their mascot, and Forest View Jaguars, their colors and their mascot on the sign saying, there's a game Friday night. Back to the cycling of the messages, he said, the principal, had said that, if we have a PTO meeting in a given week, and we have a volleyball game, or we have a football game, it'd be nice to be able to cycle those through, not every 10 seconds, but, every 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, so that if you're sitting at that red light, most likely you get to see the majority of the messaging that they want to get out. Conversely, if there's like, school gets canceled, or there's a weather emergency, then they would want to have the ability to have like a static message there that doesn't change. So I don't think they're asking for anything that's really kind of onerous, but maybe you have some thoughts you want to add?
So I haven't reviewed any text amendment because there's not been one filed. So really this process for text amendments can generally happen two ways. One, we receive direction from council on looking into and investigating a text amendment to bring back to you all for consideration. Or anyone in our community can file a text amendment for office to then present to you for your consideration. And so in this case, we haven't done a deep dive on this topic, but we have had some initial conversations on those two options of how this could proceed. I always advise that we don't want to craft an ordinance just for one applicant. If we change the text applies to the entire community. So our department would request the ability to analyze the current text and or any proposed changes to the text on how those implications may impact others within our community who may have an interest in these electronic signs. I know that we've seen some popularity kind of rise and fall with churches as well as schools and some other civic uses, as well as the business community. And so a sign is a sign, and we can't regulate the content based on free speech. And so we want to make sure that we can, however, regulate it based on certain districts or areas that we find that are appropriate. And we can regulate different requirements based on different districts. So, for instance, if there's something that needs to be a certain distance from somebody's front window, right, to avoid how often that repetitive color change is happening in somebody's residential home, that might be different than on Wilkinson Boulevard. So it just depends on how extensive the text change and the analysis that you want our department to do is, and we'll take direction from council on how you guys would like to proceed. If it's simply modifications on timing or a number of colors and it's straightforward direction, it's generally going to be quicker for us to analyze and compare and bring that information to you. if you say, hey, look, our sign ordinance hasn't been overhauled since we can remember, maybe to bring back something to you. So it's really up to you all and how you'd like us to proceed, or if you'd like us to proceed in looking into this.
I have a couple of questions. One has to do with that process you just mentioned and how deep of a dive you want to take on it. But you made a comment a moment ago about you can't really restrict the messaging, on a particular sign because of free speech.
That's correct.
But I imagine that there's got to be some sort of language in that ordinance that says if there's something that's not appropriate, that there is some.
I will leave it to
Oversight
Parks to
or-
talk regarding our ability to limit free speech. And I would need to
I was
research
just
and
curious. I
regulate
didn't
that.
think about that until you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I guess the second is, in your review of the sections pertaining to these LED signs, do you think that an entire overhaul is needed? Or do you think we can kind of pick and choose some of these things that they're looking to do and kind of adapt that to the city as a whole and saying, yeah, this is in need of some updating? Or do you think the whole?
I haven't looked into it enough to really be sure. So there are some things I think that are unique that other communities are doing. If there's an Amber Alert, if there's this other emergency messaging, we can now have a list of contacts that have this electronic messaging sign to say, hey, you need to update that sign within X minutes of notification and get that word out to our community for anybody who's driving by. We don't really have that right now. Some communities are doing that. They might have other options in other communities for other ways that they're incorporating some of the community's goals into the ability and technology available now with electronic messaging signs that I wouldn't know without doing a deeper dive. If you all said, we want this as an incremental process, we could make some changes now and look into some changes in the future, but we would just want to ask that you are mindful of our current capacity within our department.
Sure. I think the example you just mentioned to me is very appealing. I think it's something we should try to incorporate in time as
Sure.
we're able to. I guess what I would maybe suggest to council is, in the interest of time, would you guys be on board with the idea of the approach you mentioned of maybe taking the sections that pertain to what they are wanting to do with the existing sign and look at potentially modifying just those sections and then kind of doing a deeper dive and more of an overhaul, if you will, as you're able to. And that way, that would maybe have, I guess that might entail potentially multiple text amendments, but at least in the interest of time, maybe we could have a text amendment presented to us that at least deals with this one specific need right now,
Well, let me
crafting it in a way that's applicable for the entire city.
Let me ask this though, maybe it's looking at it from a slightly different approach. You were here when they adopted a new sign at the Botanical Garden.
That's
right?
correct.
How did that proceed? I know that came before us. I thought they got some sort of relief or something.
They did. So when Daniel Stowe Botanical got their signage, that property pursued conditional zoning to get relief from the ordinances. And so now if you look at our zoning maps, the entire campus of Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens does have a conditional zoning designation on it. Although the conditions were written in a way that said this special relief is being approved for the sign. However, Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens still has the ability to process any structures on their campus that are allowable by right as they would otherwise. But that way their entire campus had the same zoning designation, but they utilize conditional zoning for that process.
Is that feasible, something like that feasible here? Because it seems like maybe if we're interested in time, it's easier to ask for relief from the code as it is now as opposed to amending the code itself.
Sure. It is definitely a possibility with conditional zoning because it is on and linked to the property and will travel with the property. That is an application that, from my understanding, the property owner would need to fill out and pay for. And then we would be evaluating that on the same merits of what are the items that relief is needed for. It would then ultimately still go to planning board for their consideration and recommendation and come back to you as council.
And that was, their sign is larger and I believe has
Some moving text, I believe.
moving text.
Although I don't think it's rotating faster, I don't think we have relief for that because of the nature of that road and the type of
And obviously it's, different area, different road. But I just brought that up because, it seems like that might be a quicker way to do it perhaps than going through a text amendment. But just food for thought.
And we are happy to process however you all would like to proceed with that. Conditional zoning is done on a property-by-property basis, and so if you feel like this is something that is a trend of something that you'd like to amend for the entire community, text amendment would probably be your better choice. If this is a one-off situation that you feel would best be handled just for this site specifically, I would say probably conditional zoning.
Is there something that we can do, like specifically for like a category of a school, for example? So if you're a school requesting a sign, you get this type of policy or whatnot. If you're not a school, refer to this.
I would need to investigate that. I'm not sure that I can do that because schools don't have their own zone.
What are they, institutional campus development?
Sometimes they are, the colleges are institutional campus development, but a lot of our schools for elementary, middle, and high, some of them do fall in general residential.
Okay, I see. And obviously, you have to be dealing with Gaston County Schools.
Yeah.
But that's gonna be on them. If they want the sign, they need to fill out the application, pay the dues.
But I'm just wondering what kind of time frame you're even talking about with doing something like that.
It depends, and I say that because I don't know how many items of relief they're going to request. With that one, we're not looking at normally setbacks or screening, because you don't screen signs, but we are looking at notification of the surrounding property owners and what they have to say about that kind of, variance or relief near their property. So there is that part to it. Conditional zonings also require community meetings, so the applicant would share what they desire to do with the community and get that input as well.
Too convoluted for what we need here. My suggestion would be, kind of what you mentioned, is look at the areas that right now are a challenge for them to abide by, and see if it's possible to modify those, again, with the idea that we're looking at this from the standpoint of the entire city. And
Did you
address
say
that
that
first,
in-
and then
I'm
take a
sorry.
deeper dive on the entire code section.
What the sign entails, so I guess we see, but I would be concerned that they have their input on this, because if you think, I've seen some of those signs, you think about just flashing, and I'm not saying that's what they're gonna do,
Yeah.
but if I lived there, I'd probably be a little frustrated if that-
Well,
I think
they
that's
have
one
the
of the things that can be
opportunity.
stipulated in the modified
Yeah.
language, is you could say, it's not gonna rotate every 5 seconds, but if it's 30 seconds or 60 seconds, but it's not gonna be something that's
Yeah.
obnoxious.
And certainly, even if we did the text amendment, that would also require a public hearing before the planning and zoning board as well as before council. Now, they wouldn't get the type of notice that they'd probably get with the conditional zoning, where it's, we send it out specifically to surrounding property areas. But, a text amendment also contains the ability for the public to come and comment.
What did you say about the individual applicant coming in for redoing the text amendment for what they want to do specifically?
So typically, if we
Without-
have an applicant that they are trying to get your consideration of a text amendment specifically to meet their needs, the way we generally, then that is direction from the city to city staff, and those fees are incurred by the city.
Thank you.
What is, ballpark, what are those fees roughly we're talking about? If the applicant were to,
For a text amendment, it is, I believe it is over $500 for the application. There's a technology fee of 10% on that. Public notice is, I believe it's $124, because that's a legal ad we have to file with the Gaston Gazette. Text amendments do not require mail notices, so that fee is not in there, but it is several hundred.
let's say, $100 a time, yeah.
Well, thoughts on how to approach this then?
I mean, I'm fine either way. I mean, the way I look at it, just make sure, my big thing is the community has a little bit of input, the surrounding areas. So if they want to come and speak at council, that's fine. I would like to see it, of course, what it's gonna look like, but I don't have.
And the sign obviously would be in the same spot
Yeah,
as it.
for now.
For now,
Well,
new complexity now.
no, I'm saying if we end up doing anything with that, I think it should fall on us to do that updating versus the applicant. If we think that this is gonna apply not just to this applicant, but potentially others around the city in the future, I think it's on us to initiate that.
Yeah,
So-
I'm fine.
the
I mean, so the
next
direction, I guess, would be to staff to explore the appropriate text amendment.
And to the extent of that exploration, whether you
Yeah.
want it to be a full review of the electronic messaging signs, or whether you want me to target specific areas of that ordinance for your consideration.
I think if we're talking about, the difference between 1 month and 6 months, I think we look at doing it kind of piecemeal. And maybe if you guys are open to it, would it be appropriate to have you and the school kind of?
I think I would prefer a bit more clarity in terms of if the city is the applicant or the school is the applicant.
Okay. So does that, more motion or?
Put the city as the applicant.
Yeah.
This is something we gotta do regardless, like Jason was saying.
Mhm.
This is two government entities trying to cooperate to get something resolved. I don't see any harm in that, right?
Yeah.
And we need to have better communication and relationship with the Gaston County Schools, so,
Mhm.
I think it's just a council directive, we're the applicant,
Yeah.
and then we initiate it. Does that require a vote, Jim?
I think I think the direction is sufficient.
I don't think anything's matter if you're voting on it, I think that'd be fine too. Yeah.
Parks, do you think we should vote?
Either
I-
way, it's-
Either way.
normally you just instruct council, but if you want to vote.
Let's just vote.
You want it? Someone wants to make a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion
All right. And your motion is?
to allow us for the text amendment to happen.
Well,
Give me the verbiage.
well, I want to instruct staff to research, investigate
That.
a potential text.
Bring back a
And we-
proposed text amendment.
Is that
That's it.
sufficient?
That's streamlined in scope. Is that the option that we're going with?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
There's a motion, I'll second it.
There you go.
All right. Catherine made the motion with help from Jason. And Alex seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
let me know if I can help facilitate that discussion. We can talk
All right,
about that. Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, that's everything on the agenda.
I'll make a motion, will you entertain it?
Oh, just Miles, is there anything else?
No, sir.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned.